Rear Admiral Jimmie Taylor of Nashville, Tennessee, taught flying prior to entering naval flight training in February 1957, earning his naval aviator wings in September 1958. Rear Admiral Taylor's aviation career spanned more than 3 decades, with the majority spent in the cockpits of F-8 and F-14 fighter aircraft aboard most of the Navy's aircraft carriers. He completed 6 carrier combat cruises while accumulating some 200 combat missions. His career included numerous command and staff positions, culminating with Chief of Naval Air Training, responsible for all flight training in the U.S. Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard. As Chief, this command position was also responsible for the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. His distinguished accomplishments include the First Fleet F-14 demo pilot, including the 1973 Le Bourget Air Show in Paris, France. His performance in Paris resulted in a nomination for the Harmon Trophy, kudos on the editorial page of Aviation Week, and he was the first recipient of Grumman's Top Cat Award. He served as commanding officer of the first F-14 squadron to make a fleet deployment. While aboard the USS Enterprise in 1975, he participated in the first F-14 combat sorties during Operation Frequent Wind, which concluded our presence in Vietnam with the evacuation of Saigon. Rear Admiral Taylor's specialty is aircrew training at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. He has served with the Operational Test and Evaluation Force, the Education and Training Command, and the Air Training Command. The last 10 years of his naval career were spent as Chief of Naval Air Training, Vice Commander, Naval Education and Training Command, Head, Naval Aviation Plans and Programs at the Pentagon, Commander, Training Air Wing 2, and Chief of Staff, Fighter and Airborne Early Warning Wing Pacific. Rear Admiral Taylor retired from active duty August 1991. He resides in Smyrna, Tennessee with his wife, Annette. For his extraordinary and enduring service and his contributions to aviation for Tennessee, our nation, and the world, and for his service to our country, Jimmie W. Taylor is honored by and inducted into the Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame this 9th day of November, 2013.
Congratulations, sir. Yes, sir. You do that. And his wife is going to hang the medallion around his neck. She'll be coming up in just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Jimmie W. Taylor.
I think the recipient on the right got up here and said, wow, well, I could do that in spades, because to think about those people that have preceded me in these type honors is absolutely mind-bending. First, I want to thank my family for being the supporters that allowed me to do what I did. My lovely wife, Annette, my daughter, Tracy, and my two past sons, Todd and Jim. With them on the home front, I knew I could devote my energies and my time to the mission at hand, which I did over 34 years. At about 6 of the tables out there, I have friends from all over the United States. I wish I could mention them all by name, but I think I'd run over my time. But they are not only friends, but kinfolks. And I want to, from my heart, thank them for taking the time and the energy to come to Tennessee and participate in this wonderful ceremony. I have had a passion for flying since I can remember. One of my friends sitting at my table has known me longer than anybody else here besides my brothers, and that's Martha King. I was going to say McCullough, which was her original name, who first met me on Chapel Avenue in East Nashville when I was 5 years old. So we have been longtime friends. But I have a consuming addiction to flying and aviation. I've always loved aviation and have a passion for flying. My early interest was generated by something called a block warden, which was a guy that walked around Chapel Avenue in Nashville at the start of World War II to make sure there was no light leaking from our blackout curtains because of all the Nazi and Japanese bombers that were flying over Nashville. Due to my association with him, I became the owner of the World War II Aeronautics Aircraft Spotters Handbook, which cost a stupendous sum of $1 in 1941. It had 362 aircraft, which encompassed all the military aircraft from the Axis or the Allies around the world. That's not a very big number of airplanes, but most of them looked like it had bow wings and fabric, so you realize what the state of art was in aviation at that time. The next person that blew my mind was a guy named Russell Puckett from Eagleville, Tennessee, who had a J3 Cub in 1938 parked in the field next to my grandma and Papa Taylor on Taylor Lane just outside Eagleville, which is now the glider port. He had a strip in the alfalfa field and a little T-hanger there with his J3 Cub. He used to take off with his airplane headed towards their house, and I just knew he was going to roll his wheels on the roof. And that just excited me so I couldn't stand it. I might have left a little spot in my pants thinking about how great it would be to do that. In 1954, while at MTSU in what then was called the aviation programs, I went out to see Miller Lanier, who was the director of the airport. I knew I wanted to fly, but I'm not sure why I decided at that time. I was a sophomore. And the chief, as Miller was called, took me up in the J3 Cub, and I'm sure Huddy Huddleston out there in the audience flew the same airplane, 1452 November. Most of the people learned to fly in Middle Tennessee flew that airplane. We'd been up about 15 minutes, and the chief said, how much time do you have in an airplane? I looked at my watch, and I said, well, I think about 15 minutes. That was the first time I'd ever been in the air in any airplane. And he didn't believe me. He said, well, you're kind of like a duck going to water. Obviously, you were born to fly, because he gave me the controls when we got airborne. I was flying over there around Murfreesboro, and he asked me where we were. I said, Murfreesboro is back there about 12 miles on our tail. He said, most people don't have any idea where they are, but I've got the INS in my mind most of the time. So I went on to get my private, get my commercial, and get my instructor's rating in the next 18 months. Just to give you an idea about prices during that time frame, private license then cost $414, and that was airplane, instructor, gas, and ground school. Now I think it's about 10, so there's a big difference in those prices. After getting my commercial license, I spent a summer crop dusting in a place called Leland, Mississippi. The company was Checker Dusters. The character that ran it and owned it was named Fred Fraser. The next summer I also crop dusted down there, and Stearman's, bi-wing, and all sorts of engine configurations. But that particular experience probably put me in good stead to what came after that, which was the Navy. I knew that to keep the draft off my back, that I needed to do something other than let the Army put a rifle on my shoulder and crunch gravel and dirt for a while. I had seen a picture of a naval aviator standing between the twin tails of something called a Cutlass aircraft, and that just turned me on. He had on a real tight G-suit and kind of that pose with his helmet, you know, just, and I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I went to Memphis and took the test and passed it and went on my way to Pensacola in 1957 to start the flight program. My remarks to the recruiter at Memphis, who was a lieutenant commander, was, he asked me what I wanted to fly. I said, I want to fly the meanest, toughest, fastest, highest flying carrier aircraft you have. I didn't know how prophetic that would come back to be. I finished flight training and went to Moffett Field, which is on the bay in San Francisco area at Palo Alto. It has the huge airship hangar that was built back in the 20s. And when I didn't know what I was going to fly, it was a new squadron. It's called a Readiness Squadron. I walked into that big clamshell door hangar and looked at the airplane in front of me. It had VF-124. I knew that was the right squadron. The airplane was an F-8U-1 Crusader. At the time, it had a reputation of being an ensign killer. That was my rank. I was looking at that and said, man, is that coming back to bite me? The airplane was wonderful to fly, but it was a real bear to get aboard the ship. It was the first aircraft to do 1,000 miles an hour level flight. So I had what I wished for. In my course of my Navy career, I have not only flown just about all the jets and props in the Navy, but as in the Air Force as well. I had Air Force Exchange, and I helped put together the Texan II, which we use as our primary trainer in the Air Force, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard now. I wrote the requirement on the Navy side for that airplane. I also have had an opportunity to fly helos, gliders, blimps, balloons, ultralights, and even a space shuttle simulator. So I've had an experience with just about anything that can get in the air. During that time frame, there was a couple events that were unique. One was the elusive green flash. Now, most people don't know what it is. When the sun is either rising or setting and it touches the horizon, if the atmospheric conditions are just right, you get this tremendous green flash or emerald flash. And if you're in the right position at the right time, it only lasts about 2 seconds. And I was over the South China Sea just coming off a mission into North Vietnam, and I was near Hainan Island, and I looked up and I could see the sun peeping, and all of a sudden, there's that green flash. It was just like a laser. The next time I was in the Indian Ocean, out supporting the hostage rescue attempt into Iran. And the sun was just setting, and I got that same green flash, except instead of being a laser-like beam, it was a halo around the sun as it set. It's the most gorgeous atmospheric condition I've ever seen. Another overwhelming experience was to look up through my canopy one night in the middle of the Pacific, no land within thousands of miles, up all by myself in my F-8, pitch black, you couldn't see anything except what appeared, the canopy of stars looked like it was pressing down on top of my canopy. It looked like I could just reach up and pluck a star and bring it right in the cockpit with me. A guy named Richard Bach wrote a book 43 years ago called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It was on the #1 bestseller for about 2 years. Through his words, through Jonathan Livingston Seagull, they resonate with me because Jonathan Livingston was always pushing the envelope. Gulls could only fly 100 miles an hour. He wanted to go faster, and he kept pushing himself. He got to 200 miles an hour, and he got out faster than 200, and find speed was infinity to him. He was trying to teach the other gulls how to be more like him, to go beyond the number. I'd like to do a quote or two here. In fact, I probably in my flying have tended to push the envelope. You always like to find out what's out there. And unless you not only push the envelope, both on the slow side and the fast side, you don't ever know what you can do with yourself or your airplane. Quote from Jonathan Livingston: "Any number is a limit, and perfection doesn't have limits. Perfect speed, my son, is being there." I always like to be there. Quote, "But the speed was power, and the speed was joy, and the speed was pure beauty." The famous saying through my 6 combat cruises in the Gulf of Tonkin was, "Speed is life." I was flying F-14s out of Nellis Air Force Base on a joint project. We were flying on an electronic range north of Nellis. On one hop, I was a single aircraft being pursued by acting enemy aircraft with electronic missiles on board. My plan was to drop down on the Cactus and outrun both the aircraft chasing me and the missile that was being fired electronically. And I did. I was so low, the F-14 was leaving a rooster tail of sand from the shock wave. I was supersonic, indicating 800 knots, which is about 900 miles per hour. So it was easy to trace me across the desert. So I've had some great opportunities of being at the right place at the right time. I have had lucky interfaces with 2 presidents, with several secretaries of different services, with several senators, lots of congressmen, several governors, movie stars, including Elizabeth Taylor and Bob Hope, heads of industry, and heads of military. During my F-14 heydays, when I was at the Paris Air Show, demonstrating 1 and 2 hops a day, I had a chance to meet a lot of people. I became the Secretary of the Navy's kind of show dog. When he was married to Elizabeth Taylor, he was the Secretary of the Navy. So I got to meet a lot of heads of industry and meet a lot of interesting people in that 2-week tour at Le Bourget. I'll give you one little story. When I was at Paris, the Shah of Iran became interested in buying the F-14 or the F-15. They wanted to come back to Andrews and do an air show and fly the Shah in the F-14, which was one of the first production aircraft at the time. Just as I got there, the State Department decided that flying ahead of state in a brand new airplane was probably a little bit risky. So I took him around the airplane, put him in both cockpits. The Shah was a pilot. He flew F-4s, F-5s, and helos. So he asked some very probing questions about the capabilities of F-14. So we were doing the final walk around the aircraft, and the Shah says, "Commander Taylor, do you think my boys can handle this aircraft?" And without thinking, I said, "Certainly, Your Majesty, be a piece of cake." And then I thought, oh my God, he doesn't know what piece of cake is. I was trying to figure out what to say. And he looked at me with a little slight smile. He said, "Understand, piece of cake." So I thought that was good from a head of state like that. Now, we've had a toast here And I want to give a Navy-type cheer for this wonderful Tennessee Aviation Hall of Fame organization. My nominator, Paul Lamb, along with some assistance from John Black, is what got me here, along with the other things I've talked about. But in the Navy, when we want to recognize an accomplishment, we do a hip, hip, hooray. I'm going to say hip, hip, and y'all holler hooray. Let's go. Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Thank you very much.